Now that's significant. The Market Research Podcast.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us on this latest episode of Now That's Significant, a market research podcast. This is your host Michael Howard, the head of marketing at InfoTools. Today we're joined by Keith Rinzler. Keith is a seasoned marketing and media entrepreneur and the founder of 1Q, a groundbreaking venture disrupting market research and consumer engagement. With a career spanning innovative ventures like Recycling Depot, a joint venture with Home Depot, and Media Vehicles, which he sold to GE Capital, Keith has a track record of turning bold ideas into thriving businesses. He's also a graduate of the prestigious Birthing of Giants program at MIT, where top global entrepreneurs refine cutting-edge business strategies. An adventurer at heart, Keith holds a Guinness World Record, is the founder of a well-known Burning Man camp, and has been a professional race car driver, underwater cave explorer, a Appalachian trail hiker, excuse the pronunciation, and Appalachian, and hardest of all and proudest of all, a father of three. Welcome to the show, Keith.
Thanks, Michael. Good to be here.
Cheers. So let's start the show how we usually do with the most significant thing that you're going to speak with us today.
Well, I think we're going to talk about the open letter to the consumer insights industry that we recently published on LinkedIn and is about to be published in the February edition of Quirks. That open letter really is a wake-up call to the industry, and in particular, the sample side of the industry, because I think we've reached a tipping point, and if change doesn't happen, I think some people that are in business today may not be in business 36 months from now. And I want to see the industry as a whole get back to its sort of former glory. And the only way to do this, I think, is to really figure out how we solve the survey fraud issue.
Okay, so before we go too far into it, do you want to just explain and give a little bit of a background as to why this open letter was penned?
Yeah, I mean, there have been letters like this in the past. There have been pledges circulated for people to sign. I think in the past, a lot of it has fallen on somewhat deaf ears. There are some zealots in the industry that are well aware and speak to this issue. But we have a situation where on the sample side of the industry, there are businesses that are created with a business model that foments fraudulent responses to surveys. Those companies don't want those fraudulent responses, but the way they are designed and built and the way their financial model works, fraudulent responses as a result. And then you have market research companies that are oftentimes purchasing sample on behalf of their clients. These market research companies are stuck in the middle. They know they're getting fraudulent responses. They are trying to screen them out. Some of them are trying much harder than others. And then you have the customers, and many of these customers are sort of taking a don't ask, don't tell stance. They rely on their market research provider to take care of this problem, and they hope that the results that they receive are not full of fraudulent answers. What has changed, and the reason why I penned this letter now, is that this problem and its sister, the polling industry, this problem is starting to be reported in the mainstream press. And more people are becoming aware of this problem. And not only are more of our customers becoming aware of the problem, but more of their bosses are becoming aware of the problem. And when the bosses become aware and they start to question the validity of insights that they are making business decisions worth millions of dollars, that's going to start to roll downhill. And I think we're at a tipping point where jobs are going to be lost, budgets are going to be cut. And so that's a long answer to why I felt the time was now to put this letter out there and try to bring together a wide swath of the industry, all of whom are saying, yes, we are willing to work on this issue. There may be different ways of working on it, but we all agree we need to work on this issue.
Yes. So let's dive into your letter in more detail and what it means for the industry. I wanted to start by asking you what was the tipping point that brought the data fraud crisis into the spotlight for you, and why it's such a critical issue today from your perspective.
Well, I think the tipping point, I mean, the industry has been, for the most part, flat for the last couple of years. 2023 and 2024, according to most of the information I read and most of the CEOs I speak to, were basically flat. And the question is, were they flat for business cycle reasons? Interest rates were higher. Less innovation was happening at the brands because they were increasing their revenues just by increasing their prices. So when innovation drops back, interest in insights drops back. Was that the sole reason? Or was it that in combination with some permanent changes happening in the industry? And I believe it's a combination of both. And the permanent changes part of it are things that are not coming back. And so the tipping point for me was speaking to a lot of our customers and finding out and talking to them about this and finding out that, yes, they are taking funds out of insights budgets and moving them towards R&D budgets relating to synthetic data, and AI and things like that. And that's the tipping point. I think we're reaching a point where business is not going to come storming back just because interest rates are dropping. We've got to make some permanent changes in the industry to offset permanent changes that are already happening. And we need to do that now. I literally believe we're in a critical 36-month period here where there's going to be a lot of change in the industry in the next 36 months. And this is my attempt to say, hey guys, I want to bring this out into the open. I'm not the first, I won't be the last, but maybe the timing is such that this could be the spark that ignites some real conversation.
Absolutely. And I mean, the industry's done a really good job at educating businesses and organizations. They need to be consumer centric and they need to have consumer insights to make good decisions. But you're also got so many people now asking consumers about what their views are on and opinions and behaviors, etc. are. So you've got basically a same pool of people that are willing to answer questions, and you've got an inflated number of organizations willing to ask those people their questions. So you've got that at play as well.
Well, you're touching on something that is a big part of this. And everyone that knows me knows I kind of say it how it is. So you're the lucky recipient of that, you and your listeners and viewers. So look, the market, the insights and polling industries for many, many, many years have treated their absolute biggest asset, which is respondents, like a zero value commodity. They have acted as if there is a world of respondents and we can treat you terribly and that doesn't matter because we'll just get more. How have they treated respondents terribly? They have given them very long surveys, much longer than they needed to be, and not paid them very much, if anything, for that. They have tried to pay them with points, teddy bears, and sweepstakes instead of actually paying them dollars. And most importantly, they have instituted breakage model scenarios where they promise consumers that they are paying them for their responses, but they're really only going to pay them when they hit $10 or $20. And Michael, guess what happens as a lot of those respondents start to get close to that breakage model payout? The number of surveys available to them mysteriously drops. This is really a nefarious activity that's happening in our industry, and we've tested this and we've seen it with our own eyes. And certainly not every sample company is doing this by any means, but these types of promises to pay and then consumers never really get paid and they get fed up has driven away a lot of the industry's best respondents, the people that give the best responses. They're willing to spend the most amount of time. And so what you have left is people that are not the best respondents and a bunch of fraudsters, a tremendous amount of fraudsters who have figured out ways using technology to answer as many surveys as they possibly can in order to get that compensation. And so at the very first thing that has happened in this industry that has caused this problem is the mistreatment of human beings. We like to refer to them as human beings. They're respondents, but they're human beings. And their time has value just as much as my time or your time has value. But the industry believes, well, we should be able to ask questions to these guys for free until they answer a certain amount, and then we'll start paying them. We should be able to ask them all these questions. And if they get sick and they stop answering questions before they get to the breakage model, then we never pay them. And this is what started the whole problem. And so there are years and years of respondent mistreatment that need to be overcome. The industry needs to win back respondents by treating them fairly, by paying them instantly with real money, no breakage model scenarios, no sleight of hand, no points, teddy bear, sweepstakes. So that's number one.
Yes. So how has the public awareness of data fraud changed client expectations and then the relationship between clients and insight providers?
Public awareness, and you're talking about on the client side, not on the client side. So I think I said public awareness is changing a lot because for the most part in our industry, and again, I'm generalizing, right? I don't want to see the comments coming in because I'm generalizing. This doesn't apply to everyone, but as a generalization, there are a lot of clients in our industry who don't fully understand the intricacies of sample methodology. Those are the people by and large who assume that their market research partners are taking care of this, are looking into where respondents come from, are checking for fraud, all of that. What has happened, though, is this very simple story has emerged of people using technology. A lot of people call it bots, but bots is just a part of this. But everyone understands this story. Nefarious characters are creating bots and using other technology to take surveys as if they were humans in order to get compensation. That everyone understands, and that story is being reported in the mainstream press. And so all of a sudden you have people on the customer side, and again, their bosses who are not insights professional reading this and now having a lot of doubt about the results of their insights work. And back to what we talked about at the beginning, I think this is the tipping point right here, right now.
Yeah, I mean, you've also got the whole synthetic side of things as well, which you could say is very different, but it could easily be conflated with those bot responses as well. So there's that at
Well,
play at the same time.
I mean, synthetic data is coming.
Mm,
What I see happening over the next 36 months is a large movement away from consumer data towards behavioral data
yeah.
and synthetic data. Now, today, synthetic data is not good uh, because the data, the responses that it's being trained on are full of fraud. So the data is not good. The synthetic data is not good. But over time, that synthetic data will improve. And to be honest with you, today there are some customers that are saying, well, I don't think my consumer response data is very good. I know that synthetic data is not very good. So if I'm going to have data that's not very good, I might as well pay less for it, and that's synthetic data. So I think this is I think this is that tipping point we've been referring to.
Mm,
Synthetic data has a long way to go, but it's going to get better and better. The one area that I also speak a lot about is that uh, synthetic data, even when it is good, can only be based on the past.
mm,
It's only based on data that was generated in the past. And there's always going to be a need for 100% guaranteed human respondents. Always. In fact, the value of those guaranteed human responses is going to increase, and it should increase. Part of the problem is that our customers are always pressing the industry for lower cost, and
mm.
that usually ends up being lower cost sample, and that lower cost sample is full of fraud. 100% guaranteed human responses, that costs more,
Yeah.
and customers have to be willing to pay more. So there's never going to be a time when synthetic data takes over completely from consumer responses. If you asked people a question about gun control the day before the shooting with Trump, and the day after the shooting with Trump, you were likely to get pretty significant differences. Synthetic data wouldn't pick that up
Yeah.
because it's only based on responses in the past. So, but I think synthetic data is going to take a lot away from consumer responses from a directional perspective. Once the synthetic data is able to be trained on a data set that is 100% guaranteed human.
Yeah. And once also, I mean, what it's also going to do is really highlight and make even more valuable primary data. So organizations that have been collecting high quality primary data for a long time, whether it's behavioral or transactional or whatnot, that's all going to be a source for that
Yeah.
synthetic data to use as well. So,
Yeah.
and it's going to be better
Yeah.
at doing it in real time as well.
I
Um,
think those companies are well positioned. Companies that are collecting behavioral data are well positioned.
yeah.
But the synthetic data can be trained on behavioral data, but it also needs to be trained on actual consumer responses.
Yes.
The two are not substitutable in a lot of cases. Behavioral data is great when it comes to purchase intent, all of these types of things, but which of these commercials are funniest? That's you need live humans
Mm.
for that.
So you were saying just before that live human responses are going to increase in value and impact that they can provide. Um, and you've also talked about the respondent mistreatment and commoditization, which have been factors for or key drivers for fraud.
Yeah.
How can the industry then address these symptomatic issues?
Well, um, you have to be a little bit more specific in that question because there's a different answer if you're asking how can the sample industry respond to this? There's a different answer, how can market research companies respond? And there's a different answer, how can customers respond? So, where do you want to go first?
Let's start with the customer because that's the most important thing.
Yeah, so customers need to become a lot more knowledgeable on the intricacies of sample methodology. And they need to start asking very serious questions. Exactly how were my respondents recruited? Exactly how are they paid? Are these respondents coming through a marketplace, which the marketplaces are a large part of this fraud problem, to be honest. River sampling and, uh, you know, so customers need to become more knowledgeable and ask the hard questions. Number two, customers need to recognize that a guaranteed 100% guaranteed human panel will cost a lot more for them to utilize, and it's worth it because what is the cost of those lower cost responses you're using that are 40% or 30% or 20% fraud? And it's not the fraud that you can catch that's the problem. It's the fraud you're not catching. And a lot of people in the industry know very well a tremendous amount of fraudulent answers are getting through because the fraudsters are really, really good at what they do. And it is almost impossible to distinguish the fraudulent answers from the truthful answers. And the fraudulent answers are not just bots. It also can be people who misrepresent who they are. There are large groups of people out there. Pay for Your Say is one of them that you may have heard of, that get together to talk about what insights projects are out there, what you have to say to be accepted as a respondent to that project. I mean, it's terrible. So if the industry starts to form guaranteed human response panels in a closed loop, then customers have to be willing to pay more for that because that's the incentive to form those panels. So that's my answer for customers. And I think customers should refuse to accept respondents that are paid through a breakage model. Refuse to accept respondents that are not compensated in cash. Should be requiring 100% guaranteed human panels. These are all things that customers can start doing. Michael, what if customers started saying to their market research providers, I want to insert a clause in my contract with you that brings forth a penalty every time I can prove that there was a non-human response in the results you sent me? What would that do to move the industry? It would do a lot. A lot. So I think customers really have the biggest stick in this whole thing, to be honest.
A good point. So what if we move on to the market researcher then? In light of customers wanting 100% human panels, or trying to solve this fraud issue, what's the market researcher's role in it all?
Well, I think the market researcher's primary role is educating the customers, helping to educate the customers. I said in my open letter, I thought that the industry was going to move into two separate camps at some point. One are people that provide very high quality, low fraud data, and they can prove it, and they charge a higher price. And another group that is working more with, say, directional type data, and they are providing that data at a much lower cost, but acknowledging that there could be some fraud and quality problems with that data. It's up to the customer, and there's nothing wrong with that as long as the customer understands the difference between the two. And it's really up to the market research companies to educate customers about the difference between the two and to be honest with customers about the fraud issue. Right now, there are a lot of there are some market research companies stuck in the middle who know they have a fraud problem, who know the responses they're getting from the sample industry and from the marketplaces are full of fraud, are doing their best to screen out what they can, but they know good and well that they are still sending fraudulent responses through to their end client. And they're not necessarily being transparent about that. Because why? Because they would potentially lose the business. But we have to start being more transparent in order for this whole setup to change. Customer education, I would say, and transparency, primary roles for the market research companies in the middle.
And then at the top end of it, the sample providers.
Yeah, they've got some work to do. And they have to get started down that long, slow process. So what can the sample companies do? They can start developing 100% guaranteed human panels now. Maybe they don't connect those panels to a marketplace. Or if they do connect the panels, it's with a one-way valve. Questions can come in, but panelists can't come in. I think this is something that they could and should start working on now, and it's going to take a long time to build panels of any kind of scale, but you have to start somewhere. Number two, I think there's a lot more verification that could be happening at the top of the funnel. The sample industry is desperate for respondents for reasons we've already talked about. So they lower the barriers to entry, which is what allows all the fraudsters to come in. And they need to raise those barriers back up and become comfortable with a smaller number of respondents and possibly even smaller N sizes, but a higher level of assurance that these are real humans. And of course, we developed and instituted what we call a push model of survey delivery, which is different from what the industry uses, which is a pull model. And we believe that the push model stops most fraud before it ever even comes in because it takes away the incentive. How the industry could scale up with our particular model, I'm not the right person to ask. Someone from the sample industry potentially is. I just know that our model works and it prevents fraud on the front end, so we don't have to screen for fraud after the respondents already come in. So I think there is a lot of work cut out for the sample industry, and I think that's the part of the industry that is at most risk in the next 36 months.
So, I mean, a typical N size is 1,000. That's what a lot of people try to aim for. Do you think we're getting to a place with technology and modeling that we can, with more greater confidence, reduce that?
That's a really interesting question. I am tempted to say no, because I believe that if you look at the polling industry, for example, I believe part of the problem the polling industry is experiencing is because over the years, there was more and more and more thought that they could reduce N size and still get valid answers to their questions. And I think we've all seen, and it's been widely reported in the media, that that's not necessarily the case. So I'm a little hesitant to say that I think synthetic data or other kinds of technology are allowing us to reduce in size. What I think is that we need those big in sizes, but the industry needs, again, back to 100% guaranteed human. They need those in sizes of 100% guaranteed human respondents. And I think in size is always going to be important.
Yeah, I mean it's like when you start a new year, it's so easy just to continue doing what you were doing last year, but sometimes it's good just to step back and just reconsider and ask yourself even a hard question, and it may be that no, you still need to go on, but always worth.
Yeah, Michael, we have a million 100% guaranteed humans. And it is rare when our customers are not able to achieve the in size that they are looking for. Sure, it happens. They want to form a panel of grandparents in a very specific zip code in North Dakota. We may not have enough, right? But what we do have is 100% guaranteed human. And so you're not talking about, I mean, the sample industry can easily produce panels of relatively significant size of guaranteed humans if they will invest the money to verify who these people are on the front end and make sure that they are humans, and then invite them into the panel and stop the river sampling and stop the other practices that allow anybody to join. They can do it. Maybe they are doing it, but they need to move a little quicker, I think, with a little bit more sense of urgency, because again, there is going to be, in the next 36 months, a large movement towards behavioral data and synthetic data and away from consumer responses. If we can't change the way the industry is being viewed at the moment.
Sure. So you mentioned before the push and pull models. The pull model you've seen has become a liability for data quality, and then the push model that you've seen as a really good solution. So can you just dive into a little bit more about your push model and how that works in practice and why you feel that it is an answer to that data fraud?
Yeah. And these are our terms, push and pull. Other people have different terms, but basically the way the industry at large works with respondents is that however a respondent comes in to a marketplace or to an app, they are given a list of surveys that they can take. Or they're given a Take Survey Now button that they can continue to press. And this right here, this ability for somebody to choose to take more surveys is what gives the fraudsters their incentive. Yes, it's related to compensation, but we pay our respondents instant cash, and by almost every measure, we pay our respondents more than anyone else in the industry. I mean, we pay 25 cents per question per response. So every question you answer, 25 cents goes directly to their PayPal account. So arguably, we're paying more for 30 seconds or 10 seconds or a minute of someone's time than anyone else. And yet, we have near zero fraud. And that's because a fraudster doesn't even want to come into our panel because they have no ability to choose to take more and earn more compensation. Our push model eliminates the list of surveys, the Take Survey Now button. we decide when we're going to send a question or questions or a survey to one of our, we call them members, to one of our respondents or members. They never know when they're going to receive it. They cannot answer our surveys online. We are app only in a closed loop system. And so there is no incentive for a fraudster because they might sit there for weeks or months without getting a question. So we have pre-qualified all of our members. We've done a lot of verification. We know that they are human. And then when our customers want to reach a certain segment, we have very complicated algorithms that decide which of our members that fit the qualifications are going to get this question. That's the push model. We push it out to people. We are not trying to pull them in. And that simple taking away of the ability to choose is what eliminates the vast majority of fraud for us. And I think with some work, the industry could start to adopt this kind of closed loop push model. And we're willing to help. We've thrown open our hood and said, hey, anyone from the sample industry that wants to talk about how we did what we did and possibly how they could start to do the same thing, we're happy to talk to. Because the industry profile increasing benefits all of us. The rising tide. I think we're positioned pretty well in all of this because we don't have much fraud, if any, and we have guaranteed human panel. But I'd like to see the industry as a whole move in that direction. And if it's not push versus pull, it's through some other method that is ensuring that fraud is stopped on the front end.
Well, I guess the downstream effects are if you're training people to answer surveys, they're more willing to answer more through you, and then they'd be more willing to answer and give feedback, etc., for other people as well.
This may surprise you. It surprises a lot of people. We are consumer centric. Everything we do is with our members, the consumer, in mind. Their experience, their payout, our transparency. I think we're one of the only companies that has one website for both customers and consumers. And on our homepage, everyone can see what we charge our customers per response and what we pay our members per response. Our members see what we are making on their answers, and our customers see what we're paying out for every dollar that they pay us. So that transparency is very important. So much so that there are market research, there are sample providers that recruit out of our member base, and we don't mind. We're not going to stand in front of one of our members having an opportunity to make money somewhere else. So I won't mention names, but it happens all the time when a sample provider is having trouble finding a particular type of consumer. They will come to 1Q and ask a question and try and recruit people or try to recruit people out of our panel. Sometimes it works if they are telling people, asking people if they want to answer a long form survey in exchange for a sweepstakes entry or something like that. They're not going to get many of our members. But if they're willing to pay a reasonable amount, or they are recruiting for face-to-face qual, yeah, our members will leave the 1Q ecosystem and go do something with those other people, and we don't mind. So yes, our members are conditioned to want to be helpful, answer quickly. Our open-ended capability, if you saw the kind of responses we get in terms of well thought out and highly personal responses, I mean, highly personal femcare questions, for example. So they will provide those responses for us, and they will provide those responses to others who are paying them a reasonable amount of money for those responses. consumers will respond and they will answer. Consumers will tell companies everything they need to know virtually about their brands and their business if they feel valued and if the right questions are asked.
No, very true. So
Yeah.
final question, little bit of an application time. What steps can companies take now to reduce fraud and prepare for the larger systematic changes that we've been talking about? And I guess which includes collaboration across the industry to help kind of push all of this forward as well.
Well, there's a lot of great companies out there with fraud detection software. I mean, seems like there's hundreds of them, and every company is using them, and that's great. But the fraudsters and the technology that the fraudsters are using is getting better and better right alongside the fraud detection software. And as I said, a lot of fraud is still getting through. So, number one, use that software. But really, the focus is on creating those 100% guaranteed human panels. This is going to be very controversial, but I have to say it. The marketplaces have a lot to do with where we are today. And I would say market research companies and sample providers really need to start thinking about lessening their reliance on sample marketplaces, because honestly, that a lot of the fraud is coming in there. As I said before, the top of the funnel is just they are begging any kind of consumer to come in, and then those fraudulent consumers are just being routed to survey to survey to survey to survey to survey. It is the ultimate incentive. So think about an insights world that has less reliance on the marketplaces and more reliance on companies that have guaranteed human panels. That would be a good start. And think about the verification necessary to ensure those 100% human panels. And if you are a purchaser of sample, not a supplier, then really, really start asking the hard questions and think about things like penalties if you find a non-human answer in your sample. That'll move the industry more than anything else.
No, very true. So
not an easy task ahead of us, Michael. There's a lot that needs to be done, but every journey starts with a step. So let's start walking together and talking together.
Yeah, but it's a journey that we absolutely need to take, and because we know just how valuable it is to have people contributing into the organizations we run. So
yeah,
market research makes the world a better place, and we're keen to see that keep happening.
Valid market research makes the world a better place, right?
Yes.
And Michael, from my perspective, there's only two truths in market research, and that's it. Only two. One is the person you're asking who you think they are, and the second truth is, are they answering honestly? And that's it. And if the industry can't say yes to both of those questions consistently, then I think sort of the writing is on the wall. So how do we make sure the person is who we think they are? And then how do we compensate and improve the user experience of the consumer to have the greatest chance that they're answering honestly? And that's it. That's the radically simple solution. That's not so simple, actually.
In theory.
Yeah.
But even still not.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the show today, Keith. It's been a really fascinating discussion, and I trust this has been very useful to our listeners out there as well.
I'm glad. Would love to continue the conversation. My email address is 1@1q.com. Very simple, radically simple. Happy to speak more about this and share more of what I know. And Michael, thank you for giving us this platform.